When you dive into Dostoevsky, you find these worlds where pride and suffering are just constantly at war with each other. And today, we've got this one story. It's just devastating. It really makes you ask a pretty heavy question. Can someone else's pain actually be the thing that saves you from your own worst self? Okay, so our story kicks off with this incredibly eerie line. It's not a person who shows up, it's a creature. Imagine this. Our narrator, he's a writer, and for a solid moment, he's just staring at an open door. Nothing. And then a pair of eyes just kind of appears in the dark. And this presence, it feels less like a person and more like a ghost, just steps right into the room. And the whole scene is just dripping with this sad, gloomy feeling. See, the narrator's renting a room that belonged to this old guy, Smith, who was completely broke and had just died, like 2 days ago. So into this room walks this strange, incredibly frail little girl asking for her grandfather. So let's get into our first section here. The narrator, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He just tells her straight up, your grandfather is dead. But her reaction, wow, it's not what you'd expect at all. She doesn't scream, she doesn't break down, she just trembles. You can see she's fighting with every ounce of her being to hold back this tidal wave of pain. This is more than just grief, It's pride. A really fierce, almost self-destructive kind of pride. And then, right before she disappears, she asks just one more thing. Azorka, by the way, was the old man's dog. Now, this question, it's not just, hey, what happened to the dog? It hints at something so much deeper, almost cosmic. It's like in her heart, she already knew. That grim certainty a child can have, that there's just no way that loyal dog would have survived without his master. So she vanishes, and he's hit with this wave of guilt. He runs after her, but she's gone. He can't find her on the stairs, at first. But then he spots her, tucked away in this dark corner, curled up into a little ball, facing the wall, just sobbing without making a sound. And that image, man, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's the thing that sparks this total obsession in him. He has to know, who is this girl, and what in the world happened to her to create this kind of deep, hidden grief. All right, section 2. The next day, his curiosity just gets the better of him. He finds her again and decides to follow her. He's determined to figure out where she lives. He finds that her name is Helen, but we'll call her Nellie, like the story does. And where he follows her to? Well, it's a straight-up house of horrors. He trails her to this really run-down, dirty tenement building, and he just hears this drunken woman screaming her head off. He gets to the courtyard, and there's Nellie, just frozen in terror, standing in front of this woman, her guardian, this monster named Mrs. Bubnov, who's completely red in the face and just absolutely raging. So here's Mrs. Bubnov, already drunk and it's not even noon, and she's putting on this big show for all the neighbors, painting herself as some kind of saint, right? She's yelling about how she rescued this devil-faced bastard off the streets, gave her clothes, gave her food, but you can just feel the poison dripping from every word. It's all an act. Her so-called kindness is just a cover, an excuse to be as cruel as she wants to this poor kid. Our narrator, he just can't take it anymore. He runs right into the courtyard and starts going at it with this woman. But all that shock, the shouting, the pure violence of the moment, it's just way too much for Nellie. She lets out this sound that's barely human and just collapses, right there on the ground having a seizure. And that's it. That's the moment the narrator decides. He scoops up the unconscious little girl, gets her out of that nightmare, and takes her back to his place. Okay, so Nellie is recovering, she's got a fever, and the narrator gets a visitor. It's his old friend, a guy named Mr. Ichmanev. And this is where the story's real theme, this whole idea of wounded pride, just snaps into focus. And believe me, it creates a parallel that is absolutely chilling. So Mr. Ichmanev comes in, and he's not talking about being sad or heartbroken. Nope, he's talking about dishonor, about how his family name has been stained. See, his daughter, Natasha, fell in love and left home. And for him, that's the ultimate betrayal. His pride is so wounded that he's completely disowned her, won't even say her name. As far as he's concerned, his daughter is dead. And as our narrator is listening to this bitter, angry rant, it just hits him. It's like an echo. He's heard this story before. This is Nellie's story. Her grandfather did the exact same thing to her mom. It's uncanny. Mr. Ichmanev is literally a mirror image of that same cold, unforgetting pride that tore Nellie's family apart. He's walking down the very same road. All right, so moving on. Mr. Ichmanev sees this poor, orphaned girl, Nellie, being taken care of by the narrator, and he has what he thinks is this big, compassionate idea. He makes an offer.
He says, "My wife and I will adopt her. She can take the place of the daughter we've lost."
Now, you'd think this would be a godsend, right? A lifeline. Here's a kind man offering a home to a kid who has literally nothing. But Nellie's reaction, it's not gratitude. It is pure, unfiltered rage. So why? What is she seeing that everyone else is missing?
Because Nellie sees right through his act. She has this wisdom that you only get from going through incredible pain. And she knows this isn't about saving her. It's about him replacing his own daughter. It's about him finding an easy way to erase Natasha so he never, ever has to think about forgiving her. When she looks at him, she sees the exact same cold, proud, unforgiving heart that wrecked her own family. For Nellie, accepting this charity would be like saying what happened to her mom was okay. It would be a complete betrayal of her own life, her own suffering. So what does she do? In this absolute explosion of grief and anger, she jumps up, grabs the narrator's last teacup, shatters it on the floor, and just runs out the door right into the pouring rain. So now, let's talk about how a story can be a weapon. The narrator eventually finds her out on a bridge. And get this, she's begging. Not for food, but for money to buy him a new cup. He brings her back home, and while he's looking after her, this crazy, daring plan starts to form in his mind. He's going to use Nellie's own story as a kind of emotional shock therapy for Mr. Imenev. I mean, think about it. This is a huge gamble. The plan is to get Mr. Imenev to not just hear what happens when a father's pride goes too far, but to actually feel it, to experience the consequences through the eyes of this child who has lived through the absolute worst of it. The hope that maybe, just maybe, it'll be enough to break down his walls and get him to see his own daughter again. So they go to the Imenev's house. There's a storm brewing outside, which is just perfect, and Nellie starts to tell her story, and it is just one gut punch after another. She talks about how her mom was abandoned by the man she ran off with, how they came back to the city with nothing, how her own father, Old Man Smith, saw them on the street and literally pushed her mother away as she begged him for forgiveness. Then it gets worse. He made Nellie beg for him, and then he just snatched the money right out of her little hands. And then, the final, most cruel blow of all. He gives her a few coins and tells her, "Go tell your mother I cursed." And with those words, everything changes. The parallel is just staring them in the face. Suddenly, Mr. and Mrs. Imenev aren't listening to some sad story about a stranger's kid. They're hearing the future. They're hearing what could happen to their own daughter, Natasha. They're being forced to look at the absolute soul-crushing power of a father's curse. This is it. This is the climax. Every single word out of Nellie's mouth is like a hammer, just chipping away at that wall of pride Mr. Imenev has built around his heart. The narrator has done all he can. He's set the stage. And now, all we can do is watch and listen to this little girl's story and just wait and wonder if her suffering can actually stop another tragedy from happening. And that really is the question that hangs over this entire story, isn't it? Can empathy really be that powerful? Can it break through something as stubborn and as destructive as pride? Can one person's story literally save someone else from making the same horrible mistake? You know, Dostoevsky, he gives us all the pieces, but he leaves that final answer up to us, up to the human heart. It's a powerful thought, really, that sometimes the best way to fight our own demons is to just listen to someone else's story.